Life is like a hurricane here in Duckburg. Alright, I'll spare you the Geek Out sing-along. But the two first episodes of the Ducktales reboot have finally aired, and what did I think? I thought it was super fun! Now, many people fondly remember the original classic Disney afternoon cartoon where Donald Duck's nephews Huey, Dewey, and Louie ended up living with the richest duck in the world, Scrooge McDuck, and going on various high-flying adventures with him. That still happens here, but as we see in the first couple episodes, circumstances are a slight bit different. In this new series, Scrooge and Donald have not been on speaking terms for a while due to some undisclosed event in the past, but when Donald has to go to a job interview, he's forced to ask Scrooge to watch his nephews for the day. After the nephews cause some trouble around his mansion and rekindle a spirit for adventure, Scrooge decides to take them along to search for the lost treasure of Atlantis. Unfortunately, it also turns out that Donald's job interview is with Scrooge's rival Flintheart Glomgold, who is also going to look for the lost treasure of Atlantis. So now Donald has to try and keep his job and keep his nephews out of trouble. Wonderful concept for a pilot, am I right? Now, first of all, we should probably address some of the most immediate changes, which would be to the cast of characters. Huey, Dewey, and Louie are much different this time around. Webby is much different. Mrs. Beakley is a lot different. Everything is just a lot different, and this time Donald is playing an active role. Now, people tend to be a bit wary about the concept of giving the nephews individual personalities, and I think that might be because we all remember and are desperately trying to forget Quack Pack. I fucking hate that show. But I actually think these personalities kind of work. They're not very developed yet. We've only had 2 episodes, so they've really only shown signs of their respective core idea. Like, one of them is a troublemaker, one just kind of goes with the flow, and one is apparently some sort of know-it-all woodchuck scout. From what I understand, the only one who's still a woodchuck scout, which I definitely think is an interesting mechanic because that like gives him an edge over the others when it comes to puzzle solving and adventuring and stuff like that. So I want to see where that goes. Their voices definitely take a little getting used to when you remember those squawky voices from the original. Iconic voices to be sure, but after a couple minutes in the company of these new voices that are much more individual, I do like them a fair bit. The problem with getting used to them is that in the beginning, the nephews are very much 3 complete brats. They actually start out the episode trying to be nice to Donald, but they're also trying to hijack his houseboat. And generally just being absolute troublemakers. So because a lot of their lines and actions are a bit annoying, their voices might come off as annoying at first too. But you quickly warm up to them and it really starts to work once the adventure gets going. And next up is Webby, and let's be completely honest with ourselves here, who the hell actually liked Webby in the original show? Webby was only there to live up to the Smurfette principle. She was obnoxious as hell. She was clearly written by someone who has only dealt with children in extremely limited capacity, and all she did was just go around, make things worse, and be cutesy in the single most annoying way possible. But now she has been completely reinvented as a very adventurous, snarky, and hyperactive girl, which is a character type we've never seen from Disney recently. Look, I'm not saying this is a bad character type. I like it. I like these energetic girls that are suddenly all over the place. But they're suddenly all over the place. And it works for Webby. She does have some sides to her character that make her a little different from someone like Star or Mabel Pines. But it's still very much the same thing. And her voice does sound a lot like Mabel, so that's really hard to distract yourself from. But she's full of energy. She has some... She seems to have a rather interesting dynamic with Miss Beakley this time, though it hasn't really been explored much. And, you know, I like her. I'm just looking forward to them doing a little more with her than just, oh, look, she's a bundle of energy and possibly even more adventurous than the boys. At least she's a fangirl. That's pretty fun. Someone finally gave Donald some respect. And then there are Scrooge and Donald themselves, and from what I can tell on the internet, the decision to have Donald be a main character has been met with nearly unanimous praise, and for good reason. You see, the original show was supposedly based on stories written by legendary Disney writer and artist Carl Barks, who did a lot of fantastic adventure stories and invented Scrooge McDuck. And from what I understand, this guy and his stories are not quite as well known in the US as they are in Europe and definitely in Scandinavia. I read a lot of those, plus the stories later written and drawn by Don Rosa, who is... equally celebrated and who is the creator of The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, which I definitely think everybody should read at least once. But the thing about the old show is that it actually did take a lot of liberties with that. Not only in creating a lot of new characters like Gizmo Duck and... what was his name? That chubby woodchuck scout. And Webby, of course, all that. And Fenton and Launchpad would often take the role of Donald whenever they actually adapted a Carl Barks story. But the thing is, Donald is actually a pretty big badass in the Carl Barks and Rosa stories, and I've always wanted to see that in cartoons. He's still temperamental, he's still an everyman, but dude, this is the Duck that has literally kicked death in the butt once. Come on, man, let's get him on a cartoon. And he actually is like that. He's silly, he's goofy. No, he's not goofy, he's Donald. We do get some classic slapstick with Donald too. There's like a scene where he's trying to staple together his resume, and it's really, really funny and a lot like old cartoons. But I've always wanted to see this more adventurous Donald. For every scene where he's being silly, there's also a scene where he's like going full in on the adventure and trying to keep his nephew safe in comical but still very brave ways. And this is the Donald I wanted to see for ages. This is the Donald I've been trying to tell people exists. This is the Donald that once knocked someone out with the Holy Grail and locked himself in a room with a guy that could literally dissolve him by touch. Granted, that's a Don Rosa story, but they very much draw on the same things. The badass side of Donald that comes out when things get rough. And speaking of badasses, Scrooge is an ultra badass this time around. Again, the original show didn't not make him badass, but they played up the old man who's learning to appreciate his nephew's part of it a lot more. And while that isn't bad, it's an iconic performance, it was great all around. Try reading, I mentioned it before, try reading Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck and some of the old Carl Barks stories, and you will see why we need the Scrooge McDuck that inspired the Don't Fuck With McDuck meme. And yeah, he's definitely there, and about David Tennant's performance, I'm warm to it. He does sound possibly a bit younger than he probably should, considering this Duck is very, very old. But he's so full of energy, you can definitely believe that this is a guy who just goes out to search for Atlantis because he kind of feels like it that day. He actually has a pretty decent arc of having grown bored of the businessman life and having his love for adventure rekindled. It's not dissimilar to a certain part of Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. And it's really well played. He has his old tougher than the toughies and smarter than the smarties speech somewhere in the beginning, but it's more like an old man trying to deny that he's gotten old than it is a badass boast. But then the nephews show up, they fight a random pirate ghost he keeps in his garage. You know, shit like that happens in these adventure shows apparently. And all of a sudden he's back and just kicking ass left and right. And it's wonderful. So yeah, characters are freaking top notch, and so is the animation. We all know how well the internet handles change, and I don't see why people are so upset about this. It looks gorgeous. Yes, it's simplified. Yes, the nephews have some odd little haircuts to identify them from each other, but then that was their point. That's what they said they were gonna do, so I don't see why you would complain about that. But my word, the comic book look of this show is wonderful. It's kind of like what Loud House did, Nickelodeon's The Loud House, by making its world look like a newspaper comic book strip. With Ducktales, it's sort of that, but expanded. Bigger backgrounds, bigger adventurous set pieces, since it is an adventure show. And it just looks fantastic. I was in love with the art style from the moment the first trailers were shown. And I'm definitely not out of love with it after watching this. It's so energetic, it's so fun, and so far I am loving this show. And apparently they're going to have some manner of myth arc. There's definitely going to be some exploration of why Donald and Scrooge have not been on speaking terms. And the episode does end with a fairly big hint to what that is about, and it is an idea that has been swimming around for a while, but nobody has really addressed for fear of shaking up the status quo. And I'm very excited to see where they take this. You'd be surprised at how wide the Scrooge and Donald Duck family tree actually is. Again, read Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. And to see them draw on that is totally wonderful. There are many things that can happen in this show, especially since we've had confirmed that Darkwing Duck will show up, which I am extremely psyched for. Cannot wait. But they also, in like the first 3 minutes, reference Goof Troop, Tailspin, and what the hell was the last one? I forget. But my point is, they're clearly trying, not necessarily to build a universe. I'm not holding my breath for a bunch of reboots of the old Disney afternoon shows, and I don't think all of them need one. But it's just nice to see that they're drawing on this, and I could definitely settle for some guest appearances. It would be awesome. So I'm really excited to see where they take this show. If they take some villains from the comics we haven't seen animated before, I still would very much one day like to see the Phantom Blood in an actual cartoon, but I guess we have to wait until Mickey gets a proper adventure show for that. And just where these stories will go. Will they adapt more Don Rosa? Will they adapt more Barks? I don't know, but I am in. I am watching this show. I am watching it practically religiously. So yeah, this first impression is pretty much unanimous praise. Outside of maybe the revamps of the nephews and Webby being a little bit stuck so far, but they're definitely very entertaining, and I'm sure there's gonna be room for exploring them more. Like, one of them does have more development in this pilot than the others, so I'm sure they'll all get focus episodes. And I really want to see how far they can differentiate these three while still keeping the idea that they're a unity of characters intact. But yeah, Ducktales 2017 looks wonderful so far, was very funny, was very exciting, super fun, cannot wait for the rest. Check it out, watch it, follow it, support it. We've already had 2 seasons confirmed, so there's plenty of Duck action for the next long while. I can't wait. So yeah, thanks for listening to me fanboy about this reboot that I'm super excited for and cannot wait to see more of. If you like this video, please press the like button and leave a comment, possibly about what you would like to see happen in this cartoon. Any characters you want to see them adapt, any stories you want to see them adapt, any place you want to see them go. I'm curious, let me know. And once you're done with that, go ahead and press the subscribe button if you haven't already to get many more videos about movies, cartoons, comic books, video games, and whatever other nerdy stuff I feel like talking about. There's plenty of it, and there's plenty more coming. You can also follow me on a bunch of social media sites, all of which have links in the description, and if you're feeling generous, even support me on Patreon. Again, all of it has links in the description. But until next time, bye bye and see you later!